Congresswoman, I've been a big fan of yours, even before you took Liz Cheney out of Congress, because you've been standing up for Western interests, oil, gas, coal, agriculture, of course, first and foremost. So it's an honor to have you on the program this morning.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the opportunity to visit with your listeners.
So I didn't realize this. When the impeachment articles against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas were walked over to the Senate floor the other day, you actually are one of the impeachment managers.
Yes, I was. I was appointed by Speaker Johnson just shortly after we impeached Mayorkas in the House of Representatives.
So I guess talk about what that moment was like, walking these impeachment articles over to the floor and then seeing the senators in a party line vote shirk their constitutional duty and refuse to hear the evidence and carry out the process.
Well, it was a little bit surreal, and what I mean by that is you start thinking a little bit about your life and where you've been. When I grew up on a ranch outside of a small town in Fort Laramie, and the things that I've been able to do in my life, as you say, be an advocate for our legacy industries, for oil and gas and coal and agriculture. And then here I am walking through the Capitol of the United States, carrying articles of impeachment against someone who not only deserves to be impeached, but should have been tried and convicted in the Senate. So it was an honor to be chosen for that position. There were only 11 impeachment managers. My disappointment, however, is in the fact that the Senate refused to hear the case. And as you say, the Democrat senators, including John Tester, abdicated their responsibility, their constitutional obligation to hear the case. We were prepared to try the case in front of them and lay out the facts and the law as to why Mayorkas had committed high crimes and misdemeanors. I would throw treason in there because of the fact that he is importing our own demise. He knows that he's bringing in literally millions of people who are going to cause very serious long-term damage to this country. We've got people being murdered. We've got over 100,000 people dying of fentanyl overdoses. We've got 85,000 children that this administration has lost that are being trafficked, sex trafficked, and put into slavery in our own country. I mean, it's a parade of horribles that you just can't even imagine Mayorkas being responsible for, and yet they wouldn't even allow us to present one document or one argument, which I think demonstrates how scared they are of this information being brought to the American public.
Well, that's exactly right. And they wanted to quickly bury it, get it out of the news, never allow it to make the news to begin with, because they know that so many in the liberal media will refuse to even cover the story. Just like earlier this week, there were media here in Montana that refused to even cover John Tester's vote to basically keep Mayorkas in power and keep our southern border completely wide open. I didn't see it myself, but Texas Senator Ted Cruz was live on Fox News the other day. He said that as the impeachment managers were just about to enter the Senate chamber, that John Tester literally ran from the chamber because he did not want to be there on camera as the impeachment articles arrived.
I was not aware of that. What happened when we arrived in the Senate chamber was that our ostensible leader, Representative Green, he read the articles of impeachment, and it took a good 20, 25 minutes because we laid out in great detail the manner in which Mayorkas has not only ignored the law, but blatantly and intentionally violated the law. And when you are a cabinet secretary, such as the head of the Department of Homeland Security, you take an oath to uphold the Constitution and protect us from enemies both foreign and domestic. And he has done neither, and intentionally he has done neither. So it's very clear to me that he has committed impeachable offenses. I think from the standpoint of the American public, what's very disturbing and sad for me is that someone needs to be held accountable for what has happened to our country in the last 3 years with over 10 million illegals crossing that border. Someone needs to be held accountable. That's why we impeached Mayorkas. It was up to the Senate to hold the trial and convict him. They failed to do that. They violated their constitutional duties. They violated their oath of office.
And yet, Jon Tester will come back to Montana and take off the fancy suit and try to get people to forget the fact that he racked up $1.2 million in bills at fancy Washington, D.C. restaurants. And he'll come back to Montana and say, oh, no, I'm working to secure the border. Oh, for Pete's sake.
Well, he's not. He's not. He needed to vote with us then. That was kind of the test, wasn't it? That was the test. That and fighting to bring a border security bill to the floor of the Senate. If he's really worried about the border, and if he's back in Montana telling people that he cares about it, why hasn't he introduced a bill in the Senate to close that border? Why hasn't he done anything to pursue actual border security rather than just be a mouthpiece about it?
Well, if you can't do the easy things, how can we expect you to do the tough things? I mean, this was the easiest thing he could have done, was simply hold Mayorkas accountable for this invasion that is taking place on our southern border. And as you pointed out, this treasonous invasion on our southern border, where we literally have murderers and rapists and drug cartel members that are targeting Native American women here in the Rocky Mountain West.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
And so spare us your virtue signaling, Senator Tester and others, that you care about missing and murdered indigenous women when you are allowing the drug cartels to enter this country and target them.
So I would like your listeners to go and watch a hearing that we recently had in the Oversight Subcommittee of the Committee on Natural Resources. We brought in 3 tribal members, including 2 tribal members from Montana, to testify about the impact of the cartels that have moved in on our reservations. The 2 gentlemen from Montana was some of the most compelling, they're leaders of their tribes, some of the most compelling testimony that I have heard in my entire time in Congress, as they described the scourge and the violence and the epidemic of addiction and what it's doing to their young people because the cartels have moved in on their reservations. One gentleman testified that there are people on his reservation that have $2,500 a day addictions. The cartels addict these people to these horrible, horrible drugs because they can't afford them. They then enslave these people, and they have to engage in things like human trafficking, sex trafficking of minors, pornography with children, being drug runners themselves. It is modern-day slavery, and it is tied to the open border. And Jon Tester, by doing what he's done, he is culpable. He refused to hold Mayorkas and Biden accountable for what they've done to our country, and he should be held accountable as a result.
That's right. And I think that's ultimately why he couldn't hold Mayorkas accountable, because he should be held accountable for the same invasion. Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, can you join us for a few more minutes? I got to hit a hard break here. It's our shortest break of the hour. Can you join us for the rest of the hour? Does that work for you?
Sure.
Great, because I want to talk about the BLM and the Bureau of Land Management as well, because you've been making some very important points about what the Biden administration is doing on that front. And I know we've got our Montana stock growers and the Public Lands Council back in Washington this week, so it's a timely conversation as well. Stand by, back right after this.
This is Montana Talks with Aaron Flint.
Oh, you just got to laugh at the Biden administration and their Interior Department. They're suing a baseball team. They're suing a minor league baseball team. There's no crying in baseball. They're suing a baseball team in Montana. I didn't get a chance to play this audio, but Congressman Ryan Zinke called out Interior Secretary Deb Haaland at a committee meeting the other day because her department is suing the Glacier Range Riders over the team's logo because they think that, that's a National Park Service logo. For Pete's sake, we've got illegal aliens committing crimes all across this country, but yet they're weaponizing the government against a baseball team. I mean, Congresswoman Hageman, I mean, here we go again, huh?
Well, it shows you that we are being governed right now by very unserious people. And it also demonstrates that they have far too much time on their hands and far too much money to spend. And it's for that reason that I actually introduced an amendment to the appropriations bills last fall to cut the BLM by 50%, cut their budget.
Yeah. Well, and the BLM right now is led by Tracy Stone Manning, she was connected to an eco-terrorism case, and she lied to federal investigators about it and was trying to cover it up, and then lied to we the people for decades, finally got exposed. And John Tester and Joe Biden still put her in charge of the BLM. Now she's given special perks to anti-ranching outfits like the APR.
Yes, and so what she was doing is she was associated with an organization that used to spike trees in national forests, so that as loggers, if they were to cut them down, if they were to hit one of those spikes, it would either kill them or cause them very serious injury. So that is our BLM is being run by an eco-terrorist.
We had a message come in on our Montana Talks app just now from Dennis in Bozeman. What solutions are there out there to prevent illegal aliens to help garner electoral votes? You know, the Governor Greg Gianforte pointed out how the size of the illegal alien population that has flooded this country since Joe Biden and John Tester took power is 10 times the population of Montana. And we've got a bigger population than Wyoming, but John Tester actually voted to continue counting illegal aliens towards the Electoral College and towards congressional representation, basically taking away power from Montana and Wyoming potentially.
So it is a very significant issue, and there are two bills that I believe we absolutely have to get through this year and try to find a way to put into place. And one is to not count illegal aliens for redistricting purposes, and the other one is a federal voter ID requirement. We want to make sure that elections stay with the states, but for federal elections, there should be a voter ID requirement. I think those are two of the things that are absolutely critical in light of the invasion that we have seen, especially on our southern border. So it's over 20 times the population of Wyoming has invaded over the last 3 years. We're at about 560,000 people, and we're over 10 million illegal aliens. So it is going to have such serious long-term consequences, but one of them does relate to our ability to vote and having our vote count and actually make a difference. So again, you know, John Tester, I know what he does, because we've got people like him in Wyoming too, that they'll talk a good game when they're in Wyoming, and they'll lament about the liberalism of Washington, D.C., and how bad it is, and that it's broken, and it's always better to be in Montana, and blah, 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 because when he comes back here, he votes in lockstep with Chuck Schumer from New York City. So you just simply cannot believe them when you have to look at their voting record, and you have to look at what they actually are doing to protect Montanans from this horrible invasion that we're having.
And unfortunately, you have to go get the information yourself or find reliable sources, because most in the so-called mainstream media will cover for these politicians and instead of covering them. Earlier in the show, and I know you certainly would have missed it being back there in Congress, but earlier in the show I was talking about the city of Chicago, and black voters in Chicago are fuming mad at their mayor for wanting to spend another $70 million towards illegal aliens in Chicago. It used to seem like it was East versus West. You know, the big cities on the East and the left coast were going against those of us here in the West, right? Urban versus rural. But now it's not even urban versus rural anymore. It's these elites versus all the rest of us.
It is. So one of the things that I point out to people, because every once in a while I get asked the question of, well, what do you do to reach across the aisle? What do you do so that things are not quite so contentious? And I understand that people want to go back to a simpler and perhaps more delicate time. Well, delicate probably isn't the right word, but maybe a time when you didn't have quite as much dissension and disagreement. But the point that I've made to them is that it used to be Republicans and Democrats. They have the same goal in mind. They might just have a different approach to how to get there. Mm-hmm. You know, the Democrats would always want to spend more money, and the Republicans would always want more individual autonomy and liberty and that sort of thing. Right now, I'm not fighting against Democrats on policy, on good policy. What I am fighting Democrats about is whether we're going to keep America, America. I am fighting against people who hate the United States of America, and they are elected officials. They don't believe that we are that great shining city on the hill. They don't believe that we do have a moral authority as compared to many countries around the world.
All right.
They truly believe that Iran has the exact same moral authority as we do.
It's crazy.
So that's
it's crazy.
what we're up against.
That's right. Yeah, and Ilhan Omar's daughter is a perfect case in point. Congresswoman Harriet Hageman, great to have you on the program. Thanks so much for your time this morning. We greatly appreciate it.